Have you ever poured your heart into someone, texted first, showed up, gave your all, only to feel like your presence was taken for granted? You're not alone. One of the hardest truths to accept in dating and relationships is this: presence can be undervalued, but absence is felt deeply. And in a world where instant gratification rules, your silence speaks louder than any words ever could. This video opens with a powerful truth that many women overlook. Men don't always recognize your value when you're constantly available. It's in your absence, your graceful distance, that he begins to wonder, reflect, and feel the shift. That space you create, it activates something primal. The chase, the respect, the emotional awareness that presence often suppresses. Most women are taught to prove they're the one, by giving more, loving harder, and showing up stronger. But what if doing less, stepping back with intention, is the most magnetic move you can make? In these first few minutes, you'll discover how psychological space creates emotional gravity. Absence doesn't mean you're playing games. It means you're operating from a place of worth, a place where your presence is earned, not assumed. We'll explore how high-value women intuitively understand this balance, and why the men who deserve you will be the ones who feel your absence most profoundly. If you've ever wondered, will he even notice if I stop trying? This video will give you the answer. Stay tuned as we break down exactly why absence is not rejection, it's revelation. And often it's in the silence that he realizes you're the one he can't live without. When you give a man everything, your time, your energy, your availability, he doesn't always appreciate it. Not because he's ungrateful, but because human nature tends to overlook what's always accessible. Familiarity can breed comfort, and comfort can slip into complacency. That's where space becomes essential. Space isn't about distance for the sake of ego. It's about creating a necessary pause. A moment that breaks the pattern of always being there, because when you're constantly present, he never has the opportunity to feel your absence. And without that contrast, it's difficult for him to truly understand what you bring into his life. Men respond to space not because they want you gone, but because they need the opportunity to feel what life is like without your presence. In that quiet, something shifts. It's in the stillness, the break, the missing energy, that realization begins. He starts to think. Not because you told him to, but because now your voice isn't there to drown out his thoughts. He's left with the echo of your absence. That's when he begins to notice the little things. Your smile, the way you made him feel calm without saying anything, the certainty of your attention. And he begins to realize that all those things he once overlooked mattered, but he couldn't see them until they were gone. This is why space is powerful, because men often connect the dots backwards. They feel the value of something after they've had time to reflect, when they're alone, not when they're overwhelmed by connection. Your silence gives him room to tune into his own emotions, something men aren't always taught to do actively. He may not be consciously aware of what's happening, but emotionally he begins to shift. He moves from assumption to appreciation, from comfort to desire. And if he's emotionally available, that space won't cause him to forget you. It will pull him toward you. He'll feel a magnetic need to reconnect, to fix, to re-engage. That pull doesn't come from pressure. It comes from absence. Absence that makes him question, what happened? Why do I miss her? Did I take her for granted? Not all men will respond to space. And that's the point. The ones who don't were never invested. But the right man, the emotionally grounded, mature one, will lean into the quiet. He'll use that silence to reflect, and he'll come back with more clarity, more effort, and more awareness of what you mean to him. So if you've been pouring into someone and wondering why they're pulling away, maybe it's time to pull back, not out of fear, but out of trust. Trust that space reveals what presence can sometimes conceal, and that if he's truly meant for you, he won't need to be convinced. He'll simply feel the shift and find his way back to you on his own. The pullback strategy isn't a game. It's not about manipulation, silence, or making someone chase you out of pride. It's about creating emotional space so clarity can rise to the surface for you and for him. It's a conscious, intentional shift in energy. One that says, I'm no longer going to overextend in a space where I'm not being met. Too often, women are conditioned to fix, to nurture, to hold everything together. So when a man begins to grow distant, the natural impulse is to do more, reach out, explain, reassure. prove. But all that effort often ends up backfiring. Not because you're wrong for caring, but because when someone is pulling away, your pursuit can feel like pressure, and pressure makes people retreat even further. That's where the pullback comes in. When you pull back, you're not cutting him off. You're not giving the silent treatment. You're simply rebalancing the energy. You're saying, I've done my part, now I'm going to step back and observe. And that observation is powerful because it allows you to see his true intentions without the noise of constant giving. When you stop initiating, stop chasing, stop trying to manage the connection, you create a space. That space becomes a mirror. He starts to feel the absence of your effort. He notices the silence where your energy used to be. And in that quiet, he has to make a choice. Does he lean in or does he let it go? And here's what's important to remember. Whatever he chooses reveals everything you need to know. If he's emotionally invested, if he genuinely sees your value, he'll feel that shift. It might take a few days, a week, or even longer, but he'll feel it, and that tension will move him. He'll reach out, he'll step up, not because you begged him to, but because your absence spoke louder than your words ever could. And if he doesn't, that's not rejection, it's revelation. It's showing you that you were giving to something that was never built to hold your love. The pullback protects your energy while uncovering the truth. And here's the most powerful part of all. When you pull back, you reconnect with yourself. You stop waiting on their validation. You stop obsessing over their responses. You come home to your own peace. You get back to your joy, your purpose, your life. And when you're anchored in that self-worth, your energy changes completely. You become magnetic, grounded, unavailable to anything that doesn't rise to meet you. The pullback isn't punishment, it's clarity. It's a loving boundary with yourself that says, I will not keep overgiving to what's not giving back. And whether he rises or fades, you win either way. Because the moment you stop trying to convince someone of your worth is the moment you begin to embody it. And the right man, he'll feel that energy shift, and he won't hesitate to match it. There comes a moment, quiet but powerful, when you simply stop. You stop checking your phone every 5 minutes. You stop crafting the perfect text. You stop rehearsing what to say next just to keep his attention. You stop trying to carry all the weight of the connection on your own shoulders. And in that moment, something begins to shift, not just in him, but in you. When you stop chasing, you pull your energy back into yourself. The anxiety begins to quiet down. The confusion starts to clear. You begin to see things as they are, not how you hoped they would be. And most importantly, you stop negotiating for scraps of affection and start recognizing your own value again. Chasing creates imbalance. It places you in a role you were never meant to play, trying to earn someone who was never showing up in the first place. You begin bending, over-explaining, reaching beyond your dignity just to be seen. And while it may feel like effort in the name of love, what it often does is send the signal, I don't believe I'm enough as I am. That energy is felt, even if unspoken. But the second you stop chasing, you take your power back. You shift from proving to receiving. You stop trying to control the outcome and start trusting the process. You become someone who observes instead of overfunctions. You begin to understand the right connection doesn't require you to beg, to overcompensate, or to exhaust yourself emotionally. It just flows. It meets you where you are. It chooses you back. And what happens to him when you stop chasing? He notices. He may not admit it right away. He may not even know why something feels different, but it does. That constant stream of validation, attention, effort, that invisible emotional labor you were doing in the background, it disappears. And with that, he starts to feel the absence, the silence, the space. Now he has a decision to make. Lean in or let go. But here's the most important truth. Whatever he chooses, you've already won. Because the moment you stopped chasing, you returned home to yourself. You reclaimed your worth. You made space for someone who doesn't need to be convinced to value you. Chasing keeps you in a loop, one where your self-worth depends on how someone else responds to you. But when you step out of that loop, when you stop fighting to be chosen, you create the conditions for real love. Love that's mutual. Love that's grounded. Love that doesn't require a performance. So what really happens when you stop chasing? You get free. You stop watering dead plants. You stop begging someone to show up and start asking, why was I so afraid to walk away from what wasn't choosing me? And in that freedom, you finally open the door for something real to arrive. Something that sees you clearly, chooses you easily, and never asks you to shrink to be loved. The high-value woman doesn't chase. She doesn't beg. She doesn't shrink herself to be more palatable, more liked, more chosen. She knows that her energy is sacred, and she protects it. She's not defined by who texts her back, who validates her, or who shows interest. Her worth isn't up for negotiation, because it's already decided by her, for her. She understands that the right man will never need to be convinced. She's not performing. She's not auditioning. She's simply being. And in that grounded being, there's a quiet power. One that says, I don't need to prove myself. I just need to be myself. That's magnetic. That's unforgettable. Because that kind of woman doesn't just stand out, she stands apart. Her mindset isn't rooted in fear. It's built on trust. Trust that if something is meant for her, it will come. And if it's not, she won't force it. She lets go without drama. She detaches with dignity. Because chasing something that's not choosing her back, that's not strength. That's self-abandonment. And she doesn't do that anymore. The high-value woman sees red flags as information, not invitations. She doesn't make excuses for inconsistency. She doesn't cling to potential. She pays attention to patterns, not promises. And when she senses emotional unavailability, she doesn't try to heal it. She walks away from it. Not because she's cold, but because she respects her peace more than she craves connection. What sets her apart is that she doesn't rush. She moves with intention. She understands that solitude is not loneliness. It's a filter. A sacred space where she reconnects with her intuition and gets crystal clear about what she truly wants. She's not afraid to be alone, because she knows that alone with peace is better than together in confusion. She also knows the difference between chemistry and compatibility, between effort and excitement, between being wanted and being respected. And because of that, she doesn't settle for crumbs, emotionally, spiritually, or otherwise. She doesn't get high off mixed signals or confuse chaos for passion. If it doesn't feel safe, aligned, or steady, she lets it go. This mindset isn't built overnight. It comes from lessons, from healing, from choosing herself over and over again, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. But with every choice, she rises. And the more she rises, the less available she becomes to anything that drains her, doubts her, or delays her growth. When a man meets a high-value woman, he feels it instantly, not because she's loud, but because her energy is different. She's not desperate. She's not reactive. She's not trying to prove her place in his life. She already knows she belongs somewhere, she's valued, and she's willing to wait for that space to open. The high-value woman doesn't just attract love, she attracts alignment, because she doesn't just want connection, she wants truth, integrity, intimacy that's mutual, and she's willing to walk away from anything that isn't all of that. Understanding the emotional and psychological triggers that drive men isn't about manipulation, it's about awareness. Because when you truly understand how a man connects, detaches, and ultimately commits, you stop operating in confusion. You start navigating connection with clarity and self-respect. One of the most powerful psychological triggers in men is the concept of emotional contrast. A man doesn't feel the value of your presence if he's never had to feel the weight of your absence. This doesn't mean playing games or withdrawing affection out of fear. It means knowing when to lean back and allow him the space to feel. Men are wired to pursue when they perceive value. But if you're always available, always initiating, always showing up before he even has to think about you, there's no space for longing to form. And longing is what deepens attachment. Another powerful trigger is mystery. Not secrecy, not avoidance, but allowing a man to discover you in layers. Men are naturally curious and driven by the need to solve, explore, and earn. When you present your full self all at once, when you over-explain, overshare, or over-invest too soon, it bypasses his need to pursue. The high-value woman knows that holding a little back creates intrigue, which activates emotional investment. It's not about withholding, it's about pacing the connection, letting it unfold in a way that allows him to stay emotionally engaged. Respect is also one of the deepest emotional triggers for a man, and the truth is, a man can't truly feel respected by you unless he sees that you respect yourself first. That means you don't accept inconsistent behavior. You don't lower your standards just because there's chemistry. You don't reward poor effort with continued access. Men are drawn to women who hold boundaries not as punishment, but as self-care. That energy of self-respect subconsciously signals to a man, this is a woman I need to rise for. Then there's the trigger of earned validation. When you constantly reassure a man, compliment him, and do the emotional heavy lifting without him putting in effort, it satisfies him short term, but it doesn't build deep value in his mind. But when he earns your trust, your warmth, your affection, it means more. Why? Because psychologically, people value what they have to invest in. When a man has to show up, stay consistent, and prove emotional presence before you fully open, that validation hits deeper. It affirms him. It challenges him. It makes him feel like a man in pursuit, not a man who simply receives something without earning it. Lastly, the most overlooked trigger, peace. Men are drawn to women who bring them emotional peace, not chaos, not control, not pressure. When you can hold your own energy, stay calm in your power, and trust yourself regardless of how he shows up, that steadiness becomes magnetic. It creates a safe emotional space where he can connect, not because he has to, but because he wants to. You don't need to manipulate a man to trigger these responses. You just need to understand them, and then decide which ones you're available to activate, and which ones you'll reserve for the man who's truly ready to show up for you. Absence has a weight to it. A quiet intensity. It lingers, unsettles, and stirs something just beneath the surface. When you remove your presence, your energy, your attention, your voice from a space where it was once consistently felt, that shift creates emotional tension. And that tension matters more than most people realize. It's not about punishing or manipulating. It's about contrast. It's about disrupting the emotional pattern so that the other person is forced to feel what they've taken for granted. When you're always available, when your love and presence are constant, even when they're not reciprocated, it creates comfort, and comfort, while beautiful in the right relationship, can lead to emotional laziness when it's unearned. A man who knows you'll always be there, no matter how he shows up, doesn't feel urgency. He doesn't feel depth. He may like you, appreciate you even, but he doesn't feel that low-level pull in his chest that says, I can't lose her. That's the kind of tension that absence creates. The truth is, emotional tension is what makes a man stop and think. It's what causes him to replay your last words, reread old messages, and wonder if he misread your silence. It's what sparks the internal question, why does it feel different without her? It's in that wondering that clarity begins to form. He starts to feel, not just think, because absence doesn't speak through logic. It speaks through emotion, through the space that once held you, now empty. Absence removes the noise. It strips away the distractions. It forces a man to sit with the emotional residue you left behind. And if there's a real connection underneath, that residue doesn't fade. It lingers. It grows. That's the emotional tension pulling at him, not with force, but with presence. The presence of your absence. What makes this tension so powerful is that it builds quietly. You're not reaching out. You're not explaining why you've pulled back. You're not trying to provoke a response. You've simply removed your energy, and that energy used to do a lot. It used to fill his inbox, soothe his stress, validate his worth, and make him feel chosen without having to do much in return. Now that energy is gone, and the question becomes, did he ever really appreciate it, or was he just used to it? Here's the beautiful part, emotional tension reveals everything. A man who's emotionally unavailable will try to ignore the silence. He'll fill the space with distractions. But a man who's genuinely connected to you will feel the discomfort, and instead of escaping it, he'll sit with it. He'll let it stretch him, and that stretch is what creates growth. It's what wakes him up. Absence creates the emotional tension that presence sometimes can't. It turns assumptions into awareness, comfort into craving, and the right man won't run from that tension. He'll lean into it. He'll come toward you, not because you forced him to, but because the emotional pull became louder than his pride. And when that happens, you won't need to chase. You'll simply need to receive. There's a shift that happens when a man begins to truly recognize your value, not just intellectually, but emotionally. You'll feel it before he ever says a word. His energy changes, his presence deepens, and suddenly, you're no longer chasing clarity. It arrives on its own through his consistent actions. Because when a man realizes your worth, the guessing stops, the games fade, and the effort begins. One of the first signs is the return of intentional communication, not just a casual hey or the breadcrumb texts that kept you on the hook before. This time his words carry weight. He's reaching out with purpose, checking in, asking how you're feeling, following up on the little things you once shared that he used to overlook. Why? Because now he's paying attention. Now he realizes that losing your presence means losing more than just comfort. It means losing connection, depth, and peace. Another sign. His actions start matching his words. Where before there might have been promises with no follow-through, now you see him showing up. He makes plans and keeps them. He creates space for you in his life. Instead of asking you to squeeze into the corners of his schedule, he's no longer just reacting to your energy. He's initiating. Because now he understands the cost of your silence. You'll also notice a softness in him, a humility. It may come in the form of a quiet apology, a vulnerable truth, or a moment where his guard drops, and he admits he didn't fully see you until you stepped away. That kind of vulnerability is a clear indicator. He's not operating from ego anymore. He's feeling your absence not as punishment, but as revelation, and it's making him reflect deeply. Another powerful sign is emotional consistency, not the up and down, hot and cold confusion that kept you second-guessing yourself. When a man realizes your worth, he wants to create safety. He wants to be the one who grounds you, not the one who destabilizes you. So he becomes more present, more steady, more emotionally available. You're not left wondering what's going on, because he starts showing you in real time how he feels. And then there's his willingness to grow. This is perhaps the clearest sign of all. When a man begins to recognize your worth, he doesn't just reflect, he adjusts. He takes accountability for how he showed up. He starts working on the parts of himself that block the connection. Whether it's communication, emotional maturity, or reliability, he begins to rise, not perfectly, but intentionally, because now he sees you as someone he can't afford to lose. Here's the truth. When a man is truly moved by your absence, he will change the way he moves around you. He won't just tell you he misses you. He'll show you why you were never just another woman. You were the wake-up call, the mirror, the moment that made him realize he was in the presence of someone rare. And once he sees that clearly, everything about how he shows up will begin to reflect it. There comes a point where you stop asking, what does he want? And start asking, what do I deserve? That shift is everything. It's the moment you stop centering him, his feelings, his confusion, and you finally start choosing you. Not from bitterness, not from ego, but from alignment. From deep, unshakable self-worth. Stepping into your power doesn't mean being cold. It means being clear. Clear about your value. Clear about your standards. Clear about the kind of love you're no longer willing to beg for. Because real power isn't loud. It doesn't need to chase, to prove, to perform. It just is. It's felt, it's respected, and it changes the dynamic entirely. When you reclaim your power, your energy stops leaking into places that drain you. You stop romanticizing potential. You stop settling for connection that's inconsistent, confusing, or conditional. You stop abandoning yourself for the sake of keeping someone who wouldn't choose you fully. And instead, you become the kind of woman who's so rooted in self-respect. She naturally attracts the kind of man who's ready, steady, and emotionally available. Power is saying no without guilt, walking away without closure, holding space for the right person without filling the void with the wrong one. It's trusting that you don't need to convince anyone to choose you, because your presence is not a privilege to be taken lightly. The moment you step into your power, the whole game changes. You see through excuses. You stop entertaining mixed signals. You detach from what confuses you and lean into what empowers you, because you're not just looking for love anymore. You're holding out for truth, for consistency, for real emotional safety. So let this be the moment you stop shrinking, stop waiting, stop giving your light to people who dim it. Your worth isn't hidden, It's just been buried beneath habits of overgiving, over-explaining, and overcompensating. But not anymore. From this moment forward, you choose peace over pressure, self-respect over validation, alignment over attachment. Because once a woman steps into her power, she doesn't beg, she doesn't chase, she attracts, and she decides.